The red Ferrari was parked 20 feet from me when my daughter took the keys from the billionaire who had abandoned her 15 years earlier. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Then Emily turned toward me. She walked past the woman, past the car, past the people holding up their phones, and stopped directly in front of me. She placed the Ferrari key in my palm. "Dad, this changes nothing between us." 6 words. That was all. But before I tell you what happened next, you need to understand why those 6 words nearly brought a 57-year-old man to his knees. My name is Daniel Mercer, though everybody who knows me calls me Dan. And until that Saturday morning in May, I thought I understood exactly what family meant. Emily's graduation was being held at Ohio State University in Columbus. I'd gotten there ridiculously early, because that's what fathers do when they're afraid of missing something important. I parked my old Ford pickup in a garage 3 blocks away and walked over wearing the navy blazer Emily had bought me for Christmas. "You need one jacket that doesn't have grease on it," she told me. I'd worked maintenance most of my adult life. Apartment buildings mostly. Boilers, busted pipes, air conditioners that always seemed to quit on the hottest day of July. My hands looked like the work I'd done. Emily used to joke that I could repair anything except my truck. She wasn't wrong. That morning, families were everywhere. Mothers carried flowers, fathers took pictures, grandparents shuffled toward their seats while younger relatives tried to organize everybody. I sat there holding a small bouquet of yellow roses and thinking about a completely different version of Emily. Not the confident young woman wearing a graduation gown. A little girl. Dirty cheeks, tangled hair, a coat too thin for November. I could still see her standing outside a grocery store 15 years earlier with her hands tucked beneath her arms. But I wasn't thinking about that when they called her name. Emily Rachel Mercer. I stood so quickly that the man beside me laughed. "That yours?" "That's my girl." I probably clapped louder than anybody. Emily spotted me from across the crowd and smiled. That smile alone was worth every overtime shift I'd ever worked. After the ceremony, I found her near a row of trees where graduates were taking photographs. She threw her arms around me. "You cried." I had something in my eye. For 2 hours, persistent something. She laughed. I handed her the roses. We had dinner reservations at a steakhouse that evening. Nothing fancy by some people's standards, but fancy enough that I'd check the menu online first. Then Emily's smile disappeared. She was looking over my shoulder. I turned. A woman was walking toward us. She was somewhere in her late 60s, silver blonde hair, perfectly styled cream-colored suit posture, so straight she looked taller than she really was. I recognized her before she reached us. Victoria Whitmore, Emily's biological grandmother. I'd seen that face in business magazines and newspaper photographs over the years. Whitmore Properties owned office buildings, shopping centers, and developments across Ohio and several neighboring states. But to me, she wasn't a billionaire. She was the woman who knew her granddaughter existed and stayed away. "Emily," she said. Emily tightened her grip on the flowers. "Victoria, not Grandma." Victoria. The woman noticed me. "Mr. Mercer, Miss Whitmore." No handshake, no hug. Then I noticed people turning toward the street. An attendant was pulling up in a bright red Ferrari. At first, I honestly didn't connect it to us. Then Victoria reached into her purse. She removed a key. "Emily," she said loud enough for several nearby families to hear, "I know we've had our differences." Emily said nothing. Victoria extended the key. "You've accomplished something extraordinary. Your mother would have been proud." That got my attention. Rachel. Emily's biological mother had been dead for years, and Victoria had barely acknowledged her granddaughter afterward. Yet there she stood, invoking Rachel's memory, as though they'd all been one happy family. Victoria continued, "This is only the beginning of what I can offer you." Emily stared at the Ferrari. I stared at Victoria. Then she said the words I still remember exactly. "You've proven you're worthy of coming home." Something inside me went cold. Worthy. Coming home. I looked at Emily. For 15 years, my house had been her home. It wasn't impressive. 3 bedrooms after I'd converted the little den, vinyl siding, a kitchen floor I'd installed myself and complained about for the next decade because one corner never sat quite right. But that was where Emily learned to ride a bicycle, where we decorated Christmas trees, where she stayed awake waiting for the tooth fairy, where I sat beside her bed when she had pneumonia, where we fought about curfews, where college acceptance letters were opened at the kitchen table. Home wasn't something waiting for Emily at the end of a billionaire's driveway. She already had one. I wanted to say that. I didn't. Because Emily was an adult, and this was her moment. Victoria held the key out farther. Emily looked at it. Then she took it. I won't pretend that didn't hurt. My stomach dropped. The Ferrari was probably worth more than my house. For one ugly second, a thought entered my mind that I'm ashamed to admit. Maybe this was what Victoria had been waiting for. Maybe money could open a door 15 years of silence couldn't. Emily looked at the key in her hand. Victoria smiled. Then Emily turned away from her. She walked directly toward me. Her eyes were wet. She took my right hand, opened my fingers, and placed the Ferrari key in my palm. "Dad," she said quietly, "this changes nothing between us." I stared at her. Behind Emily, Victoria's smile vanished. I closed my fingers around the key. And suddenly, I wasn't standing at a college graduation anymore. I was back outside that grocery store 15 years earlier, looking at a frightened little girl asking strangers for food. Because to understand why Victoria Whitmore believed Emily needed to prove herself worthy of coming home, you have to understand how Emily came into my life. And why, when she was 3 years old and needed someone, most of the people with everything gave her nothing. I was 42 then, divorced, childless, living alone. And on one cold November afternoon, I went to Kroger for coffee and laundry detergent. I came home with neither. Instead, I met the little girl who would become my daughter. 15 years earlier, I wasn't looking for a daughter. Most days, I wasn't looking for much of anything beyond getting through work, eating something that didn't come from a drive-through window, and remembering to take the trash cans to the curb on Thursday night. I was 42 and divorced. My marriage had ended 3 years earlier without some spectacular betrayal. No affair, no screaming match in a courtroom. Linda and I simply reached the point where two people who once wanted the same life realized they didn't anymore. We never had children. After she left, I stayed in the little house outside Columbus because selling it seemed like more trouble than keeping it. I worked as a maintenance supervisor for an apartment complex. By 7 every morning, I was usually dealing with a leaking faucet, broken furnace, or tenant convinced I personally controlled the temperature outside. I liked the work. Machines made sense. If something was broken, you found the problem and fixed it. People weren't always that simple. That November afternoon was cold enough that I remember pulling my jacket tighter before crossing the Kroger parking lot. I needed coffee, laundry detergent, and something for dinner. That's when I saw her. She was standing near the shopping carts. Tiny, maybe 3 years old. Her brown hair was tangled around her face, and she wore a faded purple sweatshirt beneath a coat that looked 2 sizes too big, but somehow still wasn't warm enough. People passed her. Some didn't notice. Others noticed and looked away. As I got closer, she looked up at me. "Sir," I stopped. Her voice was so quiet, I almost didn't hear it. "Do you have anything to eat?" I looked around immediately. "Where's your mom?" The little girl shrugged. "She's coming back." "Where did she go?" Another shrug. I crouched so I wasn't towering over her. How long has she been gone? I don't know. There are moments when your brain tells you something before you can explain why. Something was wrong. I asked her name. "Emily." "I'm Dan." She stared at me suspiciously. "Are you hungry, Emily?" She nodded. I went inside but made sure an employee knew she was outside alone. I bought a turkey sandwich, apple juice, a banana, and a pair of blue children's gloves from a seasonal display near the registers. When I came back, she was exactly where I'd left her. She ate half the sandwich in less than a minute. "Slow down," I told her. "There's plenty." She froze. I immediately regretted my tone, so I smiled. Nobody's taking it. She started eating again. The store manager had called the police. 2 officers arrived, followed later by a county social worker. I stayed because leaving felt wrong. Eventually, they learned her full name. Emily Rachel Carter. She was 2 months shy of her 3rd birthday. Her mother, Rachel Carter, had apparently been staying with different people around Columbus. Police had previous reports involving drugs, unstable housing, and domestic disturbances. Nobody could locate Rachel that afternoon. The social worker, a tired-looking woman named Mrs. Alvarez, wrapped Emily in a blanket. When they prepared to leave, Emily looked at me. "You coming?" That question hit harder than it should have. "No, sweetheart." Her face fell. "But these people are going to help you." She looked down at the blue gloves I'd bought her. I watched the county vehicle drive away. Then I stood in the parking lot for several minutes, feeling completely useless. I went home without coffee or detergent. For the next few days, I thought about her constantly. I called the county once. They couldn't tell me much. I understood. I wasn't family. I wasn't anybody. 3 weeks later, my phone rang during lunch. Mr. Mercer, yes. This is Elena Alvarez with Franklin County Children's Services. I remembered her immediately. She explained that Emily had been placed in temporary foster care. Then she said something strange. She keeps asking about you. Me. She calls you the man with the blue gloves. I laughed once, mostly because I didn't know what else to do. Mrs. Alvarez asked whether I had ever considered becoming a foster parent. I almost dropped the phone. No. There was a pause. Would you consider it? I told her I was single. She said single adults could foster. I told her I worked full-time. So did many foster parents. I told her I didn't know anything about raising little girls. She laughed gently. Most parents don't know what they're doing when they start. Nothing happened quickly, and I'm glad it didn't. There were applications, background checks, fingerprinting, training classes, references, financial paperwork, and home inspections. My sister thought I'd lost my mind. Then she met Emily during one supervised visit and started buying children's books before I'd even been approved. Months passed. I learned that Rachel still hadn't established a stable home. Eventually, I became a licensed foster parent. The afternoon Emily came to stay with me, she carried a plastic grocery bag containing 2 shirts, underwear, a stuffed rabbit, and the blue gloves. That was everything she owned. Her first night, I made spaghetti. I had no idea what 3-year-olds ate, so I made enough for 6 adults. Emily sat at my kitchen table silently. She finished half her plate. Then I saw her wrap a piece of garlic bread and some noodles in a paper napkin. She tried to slide them into the pocket of her sweatshirt. Emily. She froze. You don't have to hide food. Food. Her eyes dropped. I'm saving it. For what tomorrow? I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. There'll be food tomorrow. She didn't answer. And the day after that. She looked at me like I had promised something impossible. Really, really. She slowly removed the napkin from her pocket. I put the food into a container and showed her where I placed it in the refrigerator. See, if you want it tomorrow, it'll be right here. That night after she fell asleep, I stood alone in the kitchen, staring at that little plastic container. Until then, I told myself I was helping temporarily. A safe house, a warm bed, something stable until the adults responsible for Emily got their lives together. But looking at those noodles, I realized something had shifted. Emily wasn't afraid of being hungry that night. She was afraid there wouldn't be a tomorrow she could trust. And for the first time in my life, I wanted to become the person who could promise her there would be. The first thing I learned about raising Emily was that love didn't magically erase fear. For months, she still hid food. Crackers under her pillow, half a banana behind the couch. Once I found a dinner roll inside one of her winter boots. I never punished her. I simply kept showing her the refrigerator. Food stays here, kiddo. Whenever you're hungry, you ask. Eventually, the hiding stopped. Other things took longer. If I was 10 minutes late picking her up, she panicked. If I walked into another aisle at the grocery store without warning her, she'd come running. So I learned to say things adults normally don't think need saying. I'm going to get milk. I'll be right back. I'll pick you up after school. I'll be home after work. I promise. And then I made absolutely sure I kept those promises. By the time Emily turns, her biological mother's situation had deteriorated badly enough that reunification was no longer considered realistic. Rachel missed scheduled visits. Then she disappeared again. The county eventually moved toward terminating parental rights. I remember Mrs. Alvarez sitting across from me at my kitchen table. If adoption becomes possible, she said, would you consider it? Emily was in the living room coloring. I looked toward her. Consider it? Mrs. Alvarez smiled. I'm required to ask. Yes. You don't want time to think. I've had 3 years. The adoption became final the following spring. At the courthouse, Emily wore a yellow dress my sister had bought her, and white shoes she complained were uncomfortable. The judge leaned forward. Emily, do you understand what adoption means? Emily nodded seriously. What does it mean? She looked at me. Then she said, it means I get to stay. I had to look at the ceiling because I wasn't about to cry in front of a judge. I failed. Afterward, we went for pancakes. That became our adoption day tradition. Every year, no matter how old she got, we ate pancakes for dinner. Life wasn't perfect. It was life. I learned how to make ponytails after producing several disasters that Emily called bird nests. I sat through soccer games where she spent more time examining grass than watching the ball. She quit after one season. Then came piano. That lasted 8 months. Science was different. She loved taking things apart almost as much as I did. When she was 11, I came home and found my broken toaster spread across the kitchen table. What happened? I'm fixing it. Was it broken? She hesitated. It is now. We laughed about that for years. Money was tight sometimes. I kept the same Ford pickup long after any sensible person would have replaced it. The driver's side window needed encouragement to close, and the heater made a clicking noise every winter. Emily never complained. When she needed braces, I picked up weekend maintenance jobs. When the roof started leaking, I patched it instead of replacing it because her school trip to Washington was coming up. I wasn't trying to be a martyr. That's just what parents do. Meanwhile, I slowly learned where Emily had come from. Rachel Carter hadn't grown up poor, quite the opposite. Her mother was Victoria Whitmore. Even in Ohio, the name meant something. Whitmore Properties had started with commercial buildings around Columbus and expanded into shopping centers, office developments, and luxury residential projects. Rachel had grown up surrounded by money, but money hadn't made that family happy. From what social workers could piece together, Rachel and Victoria fought constantly. Victoria wanted control. Rachel wanted freedom. Rachel eventually left home, fell into a destructive relationship, and developed a serious drug problem. By the time Emily was born, Rachel had almost completely cut ties with her family. The part I couldn't understand came later. Victoria knew about Emily, not every detail perhaps, but she knew her granddaughter existed. Her attorneys had even contacted the county during the early stages of Emily's case. Then nothing. No grandmother appeared. No relative petitioned for custody. No birthday card arrived. For years, I kept that information from Emily because she was too young to understand it. But I also made myself a promise. I would never lie to her about where she came from, and I would never make her hate people just because I had reasons to. When Emily was 13, she finally asked me directly, "Do I have other family?" We were washing dishes. I turned off the faucet. "Yes." She stared at me. "Who?" So we sat at the kitchen table, and I told her what I knew. I told her about Rachel. I told her about Victoria. I told her that I didn't know why Victoria had stayed away. Emily cried quietly. Then she asked the question I'd feared. Was something wrong with me? No, then why didn't she want me? I moved my chair beside hers. I don't know. She wiped her face. Maybe I wasn't worth the trouble. I took her hand. Don't ever say that. But Emily, adults make cowardly decisions every day. Children end up paying for them. That doesn't mean the child caused them. 2 years later, Rachel died from an overdose in Kentucky. Emily was 15. There was no funeral we could attend by the time we learned. Victoria sent nothing. No flowers, no letter, no phone call. Emily didn't talk about it for several days. Then one Saturday morning she came into the garage while I was replacing brake pads on the Ford. I want to write to her. Victoria. She nodded. I helped her find an address for Whitmore Properties. Emily wrote the letter herself. She didn't ask for money. She didn't accuse anyone. She simply told Victoria who she was. She included a school picture. At the end she wrote, "If you ever want to know me, I'm here." We mailed it. Emily checked the mailbox every afternoon for weeks. Nothing came. Eventually she stopped checking. Years passed. She became an honors student, earned scholarships, and got into Ohio State. I thought Victoria Whitmore had made her choice. Then during Emily's senior year of college, I came home one evening and found her standing in the kitchen holding a cream-colored envelope. She looked pale. What happened? Without saying anything, she handed it to me. The return address was embossed in dark blue. Whitmore Properties. After all those years of silence, Victoria had finally answered. And the first sentence told me exactly what kind of woman we were dealing with. Emily didn't open the envelope right away. She turned it over in her hands as if the weight of it might tell her what was inside. "You want me to do it?" I asked. She shook her head. "No," I wrote to her. "I should read it." We sat at the same kitchen table where years earlier I'd explained who Victoria Whitmore was. Emily slid her finger beneath the flap. Inside were 2 sheets of heavy stationery. She began reading silently. I watched her expression change. Confusion first, then disbelief. Finally, something colder. What she handed me the letter. The first paragraph sounded almost warm. Victoria said she had followed Emily's progress from a distance. She mentioned her academic scholarships, volunteer work, internship, and upcoming graduation. Then I reached the sentence that made my jaw tighten. You have grown into an accomplished young woman, someone worthy of the opportunities and responsibilities attached to the Whitmore name. I read it twice. Worthy Emily gave a humorless laugh. Apparently I passed. I kept reading. Victoria wanted to meet. She suggested lunch at an expensive restaurant downtown and wrote that it was time to discuss Emily's future. Not her childhood, not Rachel, her future. I put the letter down. You don't have to go. I know. You don't owe her anything. I know that too. Emily stared at the envelope. Then she said, but I need to know. Know what why? I understood immediately. Why hadn't Victoria come? Why hadn't she answered Emily's letter? Why had a woman with every resource imaginable watched her granddaughter grow up from a distance? Emily met my eyes. If I don't go, I'll keep making up answers for her. That was true. So I nodded. Then go. The following Saturday, Emily met Victoria at a steakhouse near downtown Columbus, where I would have felt uncomfortable just looking at the prices. I offered to drive her. She refused. I need to do this myself. I didn't argue. But I spent the next 2 hours pretending to clean my garage while checking my phone every 5 minutes. When Emily finally came home, she found me reorganizing a toolbox I'd already reorganized twice. How'd it go? She dropped her purse on the workbench. She's exactly what you'd expect. That good, huh? Emily almost smiled. Then she sat on an overturned bucket. Victoria had arrived with an assistant. An assistant, I said. She waited at another table. Emily told me Victoria had ordered lunch without asking what she wanted. Then she'd spent 20 minutes explaining the Whitmore family history. Properties, investments, foundations, people Emily should meet, graduate programs Victoria considered appropriate. She talked like she'd been planning my life. Did she ask what you wanted, eventually? And I told her. Emily wanted to pursue graduate work related to housing policy and family services. Victoria had responded by suggesting commercial real estate. I shook my head. Of course she did. Then Emily's expression changed. She talked about you. That got my attention. What did she say? Emily hesitated. She called you the man who raised me. I looked down at the wrench in my hand. It shouldn't have bothered me, but it did. What did you say? I corrected her. How? I said, you mean my father? I looked away before Emily could see how much that affected me. What did she say? Nothing, but she didn't like it. Over the next few months, Victoria and Emily met several more times. I didn't understand why at first. Then Emily explained, she knew Mom before everything went bad, Dad. I have questions you can't answer. She was right. Victoria had photographs of Rachel as a child, stories about school plays and summer vacations. She told Emily that Rachel had loved horses, hated tomatoes, and once broken her arm jumping from a tree because someone dared her. Those details mattered. Emily had spent her life knowing how Rachel died. Now she was finally learning how her mother had lived. But Victoria always attached something else to those conversations. An offer, a connection, an opportunity. Once she offered Emily an apartment in a luxury building. Emily declined. Another time she suggested paying off the small student loan Emily had taken despite her scholarships. Emily declined again. Then came the job offer. A position at Whitmore Properties with a salary that made Emily stare at the number for several seconds. She turned that down too. You know, I told her one evening, you don't have to refuse something just because it comes from her. Emily looked at me. I know. I mean it. If you want a relationship with her, I'm not keeping score. She leaned against the kitchen counter. Are you afraid I'm going to choose her? The question caught me off guard. No. She raised an eyebrow. I sighed. Maybe a little. Emily walked over and hugged me. I felt ridiculous. She was 22 years old, and suddenly I was the frightened one. You don't owe me loyalty, I said. You owe yourself the truth. She pulled back. That's exactly why I'm still seeing her. A few weeks before graduation, Victoria invited Emily to her office. When Emily came home afterward, she seemed distracted. What happened? Nothing. I knew that tone. Emily. She smiled. Victoria said she's planning something for graduation. What kind of something, she wouldn't tell me. I didn't like that. Emily could tell. Dad, whatever it is, I'll handle it. And because she was an adult, I let the subject drop. Graduation morning came bright and warm. I put on my navy blazer. Emily put on her cap and gown. Before we left, I took her picture on the front porch, where I'd taken one on every first day of school since kindergarten. She rolled her eyes. You know I'm graduating college, right? Stand still. She laughed. I took the picture. Neither of us knew that within hours, Victoria would be standing beside a red Ferrari, holding out a key, and telling Emily she'd finally proven herself worthy. But looking back, I think Emily already understood something Victoria didn't. You can offer someone money. You can offer status. You can even offer them your name. But if your generosity requires them to forget who loved them when they had nothing, it isn't generosity. It's a transaction. And Victoria Whitmore was about to discover that my daughter was no longer for sale. By the time Victoria Whitmore held out that Ferrari key, I understood exactly what she was trying to do. What I didn't know was how Emily would answer. You've proven you're worthy of coming home. The words seemed to hang there. Around us, families were still celebrating. Graduates were taking pictures. Someone nearby shouted a name and waved across the lawn. But our little corner of the world had gone quiet. Emily looked at Victoria. Coming home, Victoria smiled. To your family. I felt something tighten in my chest. Emily glanced at me. I didn't move. This was her fight if she wanted it. Victoria extended the key. The car is yours. A young man nearby lifted his phone to record. That bothered me almost as much as Victoria's words. She hadn't brought Emily somewhere private and offered her a graduation gift. She had staged this. The Ferrari, the crowd, the speech. Victoria wanted a moment people would remember. Maybe she imagined Emily throwing her arms around her. Maybe she thought generosity would finally accomplish what 4 months of carefully arranged lunches hadn't. Emily reached forward. She took the key. My stomach dropped. Then she turned and walked toward me. She placed it in my palm. Dad, this changes nothing between us. Those 6 words broke something open inside me. Not because I needed Emily to reject Victoria. I didn't. I'd meant what I'd told her. She didn't owe me loyalty. But somewhere beneath all my sensible adult thoughts was still a frightened man, wondering whether a maintenance supervisor with an old Ford could compete with a billionaire who had suddenly decided she wanted her granddaughter. Emily squeezed my hand. Then she turned back toward Victoria. Can I ask you something? Victoria's smile had disappeared. Of course. When I was 3, was I not worthy? Victoria blinked. What you said, I've proven I'm worthy of coming home. Emily, that's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Victoria glanced at the people watching. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked uncomfortable. I meant you've become an exceptional young woman. Emily nodded slowly. I appreciate that. She took the Ferrari key from my hand. Then she walked back to Victoria. But I was still your granddaughter before I had a degree. Victoria's face stiffened. No one is suggesting otherwise. I was your granddaughter when I was 3. Emily, when I was 6. Her voice remained calm. When I was 13 and found out who you were. When I was 15 and wrote you that letter. Victoria looked down. Emily continued. I wasn't exceptional then. That isn't fair. No, it isn't. I saw several phones lower. The confrontation wasn't entertaining anymore. It was painful. Emily held up the key. You keep offering me things. I want to give you opportunities. You offered me an apartment. You offered to pay my loans. You offered me a job. Because I'm trying to help you. Emily looked at the Ferrari. This isn't help. Victoria's jaw tightened. Do you have any idea what that automobile costs? No. That seemed to surprise her. And I don't care. Emily stepped closer. Dad bought me my first bicycle at a yard sale for $20. I remember that bicycle. Purple scratched, one training wheel bent. He spent 2 weekends fixing it, Emily said. Then he ran behind me for 3 hours until I learned to ride. She looked at me. He didn't wait until I accomplished something first. My throat tightened. Victoria said quietly, I am not trying to replace your father. Then stop talking like my real life started when you showed up. That landed. Victoria went completely still. Emily held out the key. You said I'm worthy of coming home. She shook her head. I am home. Victoria stared at the key but didn't take it. For a moment I saw something beneath the polished exterior. Not anger, fear. Keep it, she said. No, Emily, I don't want the car. You accepted it. Because I wanted you to understand that taking a key doesn't mean you've bought the door it opens. Victoria's eyes filled. Emily placed the key in her hand. Then she asked the question I knew had lived inside her for years. Why didn't you come for me? Victoria looked at her. Nobody spoke. Why? Emily repeated. You knew where I was. Victoria glanced at me. I said nothing. You had lawyers, Emily continued. Money, houses, people who could find anyone. Her voice finally cracked. I was 3 years old. Victoria's composure collapsed just enough for me to see it. I can't explain this here. Then where Victoria looked around at the families who had begun deliberately turning away to give us privacy. Come to my house tomorrow. Emily folded her arms. And you'll tell me. Yes. The truth, Victoria hesitated, Emily noticed. So that's a no. The truth, Victoria said quickly. I promise. Emily looked at me. I wanted to tell her we were finished. I wanted to take her to dinner, order the biggest steak on the menu, and never hear Victoria Whitmore's name again. But Emily hadn't spent 4 months meeting this woman because she wanted a Ferrari. She wanted an answer. You decide, I said. Emily turned back. 10 tomorrow morning. Victoria nodded. Then she surprised both of us. Dan should come. It was the first time she'd used my first name. I studied her. Why? Victoria looked at Emily. Because what I have to tell you concerns him too. We walked away without the Ferrari. For several minutes, neither Emily nor I spoke. Then she slipped her arm through mine. You okay? I laughed. I'm supposed to ask you that. I asked first. I looked at her graduation cap, the yellow roses tucked against her gown, and the same eyes that had watched me unwrap a turkey sandwich 15 years earlier. I'm proud of you for giving back a Ferrari, for knowing what you can't buy. She leaned her head against my shoulder. The next morning we drove my rattling Ford through iron gates onto Victoria Whitmore's property. Neither of us knew what she was finally going to admit. But before we left that house, Emily would learn that her grandmother's absence had never been caused by poverty, helplessness, or ignorance. Victoria had known. She had always known. And a 3-year-old girl had paid the price for an adult woman's pride. Victoria Whitmore's house sat behind iron gates on several acres outside Columbus. It wasn't flashy in the way I expected. No fountains, no statues, no line of exotic cars. Just an old brick house with tall windows, mature trees, and the kind of landscaping that probably cost more each year than I made. Still, everything about the place felt expensive and strangely empty. Emily sat beside me in the Ford, staring through the windshield. You sure? She nodded. You know that made her smile. Good. At least we're consistent. We got out. Victoria herself opened the front door. No assistant, no housekeeper hovering nearby. She wore dark slacks and a simple gray sweater. For the first time, she looked less like a billionaire and more like a tired woman in her late 60s. Thank you for coming. Emily stepped inside. I followed. Victoria led us into a sitting room overlooking the backyard. There were family photographs on one wall. I recognized Rachel immediately. As a little girl, as a teenager, on horseback, standing beside Victoria at what looked like a country club. Emily walked toward the photographs. She touched the frame of one where Rachel couldn't have been older than 8. She looks happy. She was, Victoria said. Emily turned. What happened? Victoria didn't answer right away. Instead, she sat down. Emily and I took the couch across from her. Victoria folded her hands. I wasn't a good mother. Emily stared at her. That doesn't answer my question. No, Victoria inhaled slowly. Rachel and I were very much alike. That's part of what destroyed us. She explained that Rachel had grown up surrounded by privilege, but also rules. Which schools, which friends, which clothes, which summer programs, eventually, which college. Victoria believed she was preparing her daughter for success. Rachel believed she was being controlled. Their arguments grew worse as Rachel got older. By 19, Rachel had dropped out of college. By 21, she had moved in with a man Victoria despised. Victoria responded the only way she knew how. With money, or rather by taking it away. I told her if she came home I would help her, Victoria said. Emily frowned. And if she didn't, I cut her off. I leaned back. There it was, a familiar pattern. Even then, Victoria had used money as a leash. Rachel refused to return. Her life became increasingly unstable. Bad relationships, drugs, temporary jobs, temporary homes. Then Emily was born. You knew about me, Victoria looked at her. Yes. How soon? Within weeks. Emily's face changed. I felt anger rising in me. She asked, "Did you ever see me?" Victoria looked down. Once. Emily went still. When you were about 9 months old. What happened? Rachel brought you to my office. Victoria's voice became unsteady. She wanted money. Emily's expression hardened. And you gave it to her? No. I couldn't stay quiet. You refused money while she had an infant. Victoria looked at me. I believed giving Rachel cash would feed her addiction. That may have been true, I said. But you could have bought diapers. Silence. I know that now. Emily stared at the floor. Victoria continued. Over the next 2 years, Rachel disappeared and resurfaced repeatedly. Victoria's lawyers occasionally located her. She offered treatment. Rachel refused. She offered housing with conditions. Rachel refused that too. Then came the day Emily was found outside Kroger. Victoria knew within a week. That sentence nearly made me stand up. You knew, yes. Then why didn't you come? Victoria looked at me. I told myself Rachel would return. Emily shook her head. What does that have to do with me? I thought if I took custody of you, Rachel would use you to come back into our lives. So Victoria looked ashamed. I was tired. Emily stared at her. Tired. I had spent years chasing your mother, paying lawyers, paying investigators, getting calls in the middle of the night. Her voice cracked. And when I learned you'd entered foster care, I told myself you were safe. I felt my jaw tighten. You didn't know that. No. You knew she was 3 years old and in the system. Yes. And you stayed here. Victoria closed her eyes. Yes. Emily stood. I thought she was leaving. Instead, she walked to the window. Victoria spoke quietly. That wasn't the only reason. Emily turned. Then say it. Victoria hesitated. Rachel's situation had become public. What do you mean there had been arrests, articles, people in business knew? Emily's expression changed. Victoria forced herself to continue. I had spent my entire life building the Whitmore name. I understood before Emily did. Oh, you gotta be kidding me, I said. Victoria looked at me. You were ashamed, Emily whispered. Victoria's eyes filled. Yes. The room went completely still. You were ashamed of Mom. Yes. Emily's voice dropped. And me, Victoria didn't answer fast enough. That was answer enough. Emily took a step backward. I stood. Victoria began crying. Not dramatically. No collapse. Just tears running down a face that had probably spent decades refusing to let anyone see weakness. I told myself you would be better off with another family. I couldn't contain it anymore. So a 3-year-old paid the price for what her mother did. Victoria looked straight at me. Yes, the honesty stopped me. Not because it excused anything. It didn't. But for the first time, she wasn't dressing the truth in expensive language. Emily sat again. Her eyes were red. Why watch me all these years? Victoria wiped her face. Because I regretted it. Then why didn't you call? The longer I waited, the harder it became. Emily shook her head. No, the harder it became for you. Victoria looked stunned. For me, it was already hard. That landed harder than anything shouted could have. Emily continued. When I wrote you at 15, I gave you a door. I know. You didn't walk through it. I was afraid of what that you would hate me. Emily laughed bitterly. So instead, you gave me another reason to. Victoria looked down. Then Emily finally explained the Ferrari. You thought it was an apology. Victoria nodded. It wasn't. Emily leaned forward. You weren't rewarding me. You were telling that 3-year-old girl she finally became good enough for you. Victoria covered her mouth. I am so sorry. Emily didn't say she forgave her. I'm glad she didn't. Some apologies need time before they're allowed to become reconciliation. After a long silence, Victoria looked at me. How do I repay you? I almost laughed. You don't. She blinked. I can... No. I pointed toward Emily. You want to make something right? Stop trying to write checks. Victoria said nothing. Show up. Emily looked at her grandmother. No cars, no apartments, no jobs, no surprise gifts. Victoria nodded. If we do this, Emily said we start small. How coffee? Victoria looked confused. Coffee, phone calls, birthdays. You ask before you help. You don't decide my life for me. Victoria nodded slowly. I can do that. Emily stood. At the door, Victoria called my name. Dan. I turned. She looked smaller somehow. What if I ruin it? I looked at Emily, then back at her. Then own it and try again. I opened the door. And one more thing. Victoria waited. Don't abandon her twice. She nodded. Outside, Emily and I walked toward my old Ford. Neither of us spoke until we reached it. Then Emily looked back at the enormous house. Dad. Yeah, I don't forgive her yet. You don't have to. But maybe someday. I opened her door. That's up to you. For the first time, Emily smiled, and that was how reconciliation began. Not with a Ferrari, not with a fortune, with coffee. A year after Emily's graduation, the Ferrari was gone from our lives. Victoria sold it. I never asked what happened to the money. That was probably the first sign she was learning. The second was Thanksgiving. At 4:20 in the afternoon, a black sedan pulled into my driveway. Victoria got out carrying a pie covered in aluminum foil. No driver, no assistant, no expensive box from some bakery downtown. Just Victoria and a pie. Emily opened the store. You made something. Victoria looked offended. I can cook. Emily raised an eyebrow. Can you? That's unnecessarily hostile. I laughed from the kitchen. It was the first time I'd heard them tease each other. Victoria had spent the previous year doing exactly what Emily asked. Coffee, phone calls, birthdays, nothing dramatic. At first, she approached ordinary relationships like a business problem. When Emily mentioned her laptop was getting old, a brand new one appeared 2 days later. Emily returned it. When I complained about my truck, Victoria offered to have a dealership deliver a replacement. I stared at her. She sighed. Right. No fixing things with money. You're learning. Slowly she did. She began asking questions instead of making offers. How was graduate school? What classes did Emily enjoy? Was she sleeping enough? Had she heard from her friends? Normal questions. Questions grandparents ask. Emily didn't suddenly forget the past. There were awkward moments. Sometimes Victoria said something controlling, and Emily would go quiet. Then Victoria would catch herself. I'm doing it again, aren't I? Yes. I'm sorry. That mattered. Not the mistake, the correction. One Sunday afternoon, Victoria came to my house while Emily was home from school. She stopped in the hallway. I'd covered one wall with photographs over the years. Emily at 6 with missing front teeth. Emily wearing a crooked witch costume at Halloween. Emily holding a science fair ribbon. Emily at prom. Emily asleep on the couch beside our old dog. Christmas mornings, birthdays. Ordinary Tuesdays that happened to become photographs. Victoria stood there for a long time. I missed all of this. I didn't know what to say, so I told the truth. Yes. She touched the frame of Emily holding that $20 purple bicycle. I can't get those years back. No, for once she didn't ask what money could fix. She simply stood there and let herself understand the cost. That I realized was consequence enough. Emily eventually started graduate school in public policy, focusing on housing instability and services for families. Victoria wanted her at Whitmore Properties. Emily wanted something different. And this time, Victoria accepted the answer. About 6 months later, Emily called me. Victoria wants to fund a housing program. I braced myself. What does she want in return? Nothing. That would be new. Emily laughed. She asked me how she could help. That mattered too. They worked with an established nonprofit serving families facing housing insecurity. Victoria funded part of the program anonymously at Emily's request. No building named after her, no press release, no photograph with a giant ceremonial check, just help. I respected that. Back in my kitchen on Thanksgiving, Victoria removed the foil from her pie. Emily stared at it. What is that apple? It looks injured. I followed a recipe. Did the recipe insult you first? Victoria laughed. A real laugh. I cut 3 slices. The crust was hard enough to qualify as construction material. I ate every bite. After dinner, Emily helped me wash dishes while Victoria dried them. At one point, I looked at the two of them arguing about whether a particular plate was dishwasher safe. And something struck me. If you'd told me 15 years earlier that the frightened little girl outside Kroger would one day stand in my kitchen debating dishes with the grandmother who abandoned her, I wouldn't have believed you. But reconciliation doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. It means deciding the past doesn't get complete control over what happens next. Victoria would never become the grandmother Emily should have had at 3. That opportunity was gone. But she could become the grandmother Emily had at 23, and Emily could let her do that without surrendering 1 inch of the truth. A few weeks later, Emily gave me a Christmas present. It was a framed photograph from graduation. Not the Ferrari, not Victoria, just Emily and me. She was wearing her cap and gown holding those yellow roses, and I had one arm around her shoulders. "Turn it over," she said. On the back she'd written, "You loved me before I had anything." I couldn't speak. Emily smiled. "You've got something in your eye again, persistent problem?" She hugged me. I placed that photograph beside another one on the mantel. In the older picture, Emily was 3. Her hair was messy. She wore the blue gloves I'd bought her outside Kroger. I was kneeling beside her. Neither of us knew what we were doing. We certainly didn't know we were becoming a family. Looking at those 2 photographs together, 15 years apart, I finally understood something. The Ferrari had never been the point. Neither was Victoria's money. The real difference between us was much simpler. Victoria waited for Emily to become someone she could be proud of. I was proud of Emily when she had nothing but a plastic grocery bag and half a sandwich. A child should never have to earn the right to belong. Children shouldn't pay for their parents' mistakes. And if you're lucky enough to be trusted with a child's heart, don't make your love dependent on grades, success, money, obedience, or the life you imagine for them. Show up. Listen. Keep your promises. Make sure there's breakfast tomorrow. That's how a home gets built. Not with brick, not with money, with consistency. Victoria and I eventually became friendly. Not close, but friendly. She once apologized to me again for calling me the man who raised Emily. I told her she didn't need to apologize anymore. Emily had already answered that question. At graduation, standing beside a red Ferrari worth more than my house, she had turned toward me and said 6 words. "Dad, this changes. There's nothing between us." She was right. Nothing changed. Because family had been decided thousands of ordinary mornings before that day. If this story made you think of someone who showed up for you when they didn't have to, maybe tell them while you still can. And if you've ever had to rebuild a family relationship, remember that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting. It requires truth boundaries and the courage to do better tomorrow than you did yesterday. If stories about family dignity and second chances mean something to you, you're welcome to share this one, or subscribe and stay with me for the next. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't watching someone lose everything. It's letting them see the beautiful life that grew in the place where they chose not to stay. And when they've truly changed, leaving the door open just enough for them to learn how to show up. The end.